Hi Salil, nice to have you with us today. Um, Salil Aroskar is the lead on cyber risk management at athenahealth company in Bangalore, India. athenahealth is an American company specialized in healthcare IT. And we had the pleasure to work together at Sony many years in the past, which I have a very fond memory of. And if you want to know a little bit more about Salil's career, we have made a separate video for that. So don't hesitate to discover a bit more about his journey. But our focus today is within the area of risk management, which is a very wide area and growing, I should say, by the day. We're going to look a bit into third-party risk management. That was a very small part in the early days, but as more companies use third parties, or I would say, cooperate, have partners, even outsourcing activities to third party, it's becoming an important activity, and I would say an important fraction of the overall risk. And and also it forces. Normally in security we deal with IT and IT things, firewalls, IDS, IPS, very specific things. Here, when we deal with third party, we deal with business-related activities, and of course, at the end, there's always security controls. But we have to, I guess, understand a bit more about the role of the third party and what it does do. So it brings us a lot closer to the reality of the business, and so we're going to a little bit look into that today. Maybe to a little bit open the topic is, can you give us a bit of an idea of, how many third parties companies use, or does it depend on the management style? Does it depend on the industry? What are what do you observe as being the parameters or the drivers behind the increase in third party presence and activities and obviously risk?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great topic, third-party risk management, right? And it's a huge and critical topic these days. As we go about doing our business, we understand that our business has to grow. So the businesses may decide to focus on growing business, whereas all the other things they may outsource to a third party, or they may take help from third party to manage few of their things. So when a company is small, they start with small third parties, small activities. They just push it, take help from the third parties, or completely outsource it to third parties. But as they grow, the relationship with third parties become a bit complex, right? And you see that after many years down the line, the lines blur, right? Whether this is a third party or this is internet person. So it's very important to understand the relationship with our third parties or with our vendors on what they do, what we do as an organization. And very clearly, we have to know what is our responsibility. Right? So moving on, I think if we talk about different kinds of industry, so different kind of industries will have different kind of third parties or different number of third parties, right? If you go into manufacturing, if you go into filmmaking, the number of third parties will be in thousands, right? Or hundreds of thousands for that matter, if you're talking about a multinational company who has a wide footprint over the world, right? Whereas if you talk about a startup, the third-party footprint will be very small. But as you grow, this slowly the third party's footprint within your organization will grow. Definitely, it is very important from management perspective what they want to focus on. If they want to focus on at their business and leave out some other activities to third parties, like for a startup, if they want to focus on their core business, growing their business, and leave out the legal compliancing through a legal entity, fair enough, right? So it's all up to the management what they want to do.
So it's part, you would say that as we go forward, third-party policy or third-party strategy is an integral part of overall business strategy. Yeah? what we want to do by ourselves, where we should use the specialized third parties who would help us. Would you agree that it's has become an integral part of a company's strategy?
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like as we grow, we need to understand how to better utilize our resources, better utilize others' expertise as well, who can help our business. So some of the companies may completely outsource their packaging to a third party, right? Or some of the people may completely outsource their e-commerce to a third party. Some companies may completely outsource their image processing to a third party, whereas the organization would focus on getting in more customers and serving the customers in a better way. I think, as you very well know in the industry, many of the call centers or many of the support centers may be outsourced completely with third parties. So third parties become integral to our organization. As we grow, we have to have a policy or framework in place where we have to understand what our responsibilities are, what are the third party responsibilities, and be realistic in terms of the third party is really an integral part of our business.
So implicitly, from what you said, you're touching the notion of relationship in some sense. Yeah, I guess some of them are partners. I mean, we use the word third party here generically, but in looking at it from a different other angle, maybe they are partners. They are strategic partners in some sense because of their importance or their added value which they bring. And when there's partnership, it typically means a very intense relationship. So it's not just someone a black box somewhere. I think it's someone who is mainstream sometimes and so on. And I think to even have people on site, not only remote. So it sometimes feels that they are just the same company. Legally speaking, they are third party, but the relationship is so intense. And others are many small ones which may change more often. The partners don't change so often, but the smaller and medium ones may change on a more frequent basis. Would you agree with this representation?
Yes, I think the relationship with the third party is extremely important. Right? As we integrate with the third parties, we have to have good relationship with them. It is as good as you briefly touched upon it. It is as good as the third parties may be different department within our company. So the lines are really blurred, and that is where we need to have very good relationship with the third parties and help each other to understand what our objectives are. We should have joint objectives, which will really help us grow. In some cases, they may not have expertise in security, but they may have really good expertise in doing a certain part of your business. That is the time where we need to partner with them and ensure that the responsibility of securing the information is taken up jointly.
I think I always had the angle that you have to classify or organize in your mind your third parties, and there are third parties who may have better security than you. Yeah, it's just not, they're not all bad on low level. No, there are some which may be more into that area. There may be many others who may have a little bit less security than you, or your maturity is a bit less. And I think if they are strategic and if the partnership is real, I think there is always a natural discussion point. Now we'll come back a little bit later in the discussion to want to sort of have a know-how exchange, even because we want the same security levels, whether it's on our side or on the third-party side. And if there's a know-how transfer necessary, that is an investment in some sense in the third party. And I think I'm personally of the opinion that should be quite natural. Of course, when you renegotiate with a third party, you may say, well, maybe, okay, we help you, but now in the future this becomes normal. That's what we expect you. We got you kickstarted. Yeah. So, but it is. We must think about how to have their security if they are strategic, aligned to ours. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with it. I briefly touched upon it earlier. Right? If the vendors are really strategic to us, we need to help them ensure that our information is protected well by the third party. We also integrate, for example, as an example, we integrate our incident responses. Right? If there is an incident, we work together to identify the issue. We work together to manage that incident. So, in all purposes, if it's a strategic partner, you have to work together, have a really good relationship with the third party, and help them.
Super. Thanks for mentioning information security. Sorry, incident response. It's we have to work strongly together to prevent problems, but we cannot prevent everything. So there may be areas or risks or incidents on their side where we have to work together in a close way to manage the impact and to have the maximum efficiency on the response. Maybe I would propose to a little bit go a bit more systematically in the various aspects of third-party business. I said third-party is, let's say, general terms, and to even augment to what you have been saying. In Europe, for example, we have seen in recent directives and regulations, so in the DORA, which is a financial services regulation, which has been issued a few months ago, and it's for the financial sector, and the compliance is expected towards the end of the year, also 2024, so the end of next year. Third party is a very big part in actually this regulation. It's the biggest ever in some sense, because obviously this regulation came into existence in the context of COVID, in the context of the Ukraine war, in the context of supply chain discussions. So the authorities and the regulators have made that very clear, that the management of that third-party risk is a very important part. And that is for the financial services side, but for the non-financial service side, the NIS2 and IS2 has also picked up this in a big way, and incident response is certainly also part of that. So we not only see it from a best practice point of view, but in some areas in terms of regulation, we see a bigger push. But obviously, I think the good starting point is to a little bit look at what happens if you don't manage things well. So, are there any notable incidents which have happened, which involved third parties, which maybe sometimes give us a pointer or are inflection points in terms of the best practices in security?
Yeah, I think majority of the bigger incidents, there was a third party hand in the past incidents, right? We talk about the Toyota incident, where a third-party supplier was unable to provide the services, so Toyota had to actually stop their production line for a few days, which impacted as a huge loss to Toyota itself. Coming to Home Depot or Target, the biggest incidents in the industry so far. So, if you talk about Target, their credentials of a third-party supplier was compromised, and from there, hackers were able to enter into the Target's network. Exactly similar case with Home Depot as well. The credentials of a third party were compromised, and similarly with the Okta breach as well. A third-party employee's computer was breached, and from there, they got into Okta. So yeah, there are several big incidents where, if you are not careful enough, the source of the incident can happen to the third party.
I think I remember in the Target case, which is rather well documented, I should say, the third party was a company who was maintaining air conditioners. And obviously, I assume Target has many locations, so there's many air conditioning systems in many locations to be maintained. And maybe in the old days, you just wait until someone calls you and you drive over there to fix it. Yeah, but in the modern world, that is not efficient and certainly not quick. So more maintenance is done remotely. So that's why the third party needs remote access to a number of things, and probably even I don't know, an air conditioner maybe appear like an IoT device of some sort in your system. So in many ways, they are moving from separate to being a little bit more integrated into the overall network. And of course, if you gain access to this company, you gain access to the air conditioning area, but you may also gain access to the company at large, I think, which has happened. So I think it's an important part is to not only look at the very, very, very big ones. That means for me, it's a conclusion. There's even the ones who have sensitive data access or sensitive system access, even though they may be smaller. Maybe an air conditioning company is maybe not a very big company, but it is very critical. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I agree, right? I think you highlighted a very good point, right? Sensitive system access. It doesn't have to be sensitive data access as well, right? Even if your credentials are able to access a sensitive systems, and if that is compromised, I think the bad actors would have access to your sensitive systems. Right? This vendor, the air conditioning vendor, didn't have access to any sensitive information, but they did have access to sensitive systems, and that's where the bad actors were able to use the credentials.
Maybe later on we can talk about it, but it seems to me that we, from a security department point of view or CISO point of view, we also naturally come into the discussion, which we always have in security, is inventory. Yeah? Do we know how many PCs, servers we have, how many cloud instances, and so on? But it's also true for third parties. Yeah, and there may be, and the third parties are not in the IT department, many, they are in the business. So we have to work closely together with the business, even to, not in many areas, but in particular also even to find out how many third parties there are, what do they have access to, what system data or any other things. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, generally, as you mentioned, inventory is the most important, irrespective of whether it's in hardware, software, or third parties, right? And the most important things are often difficult things, right? So it's, as you hinted a bit, identifying the number of vendors in a larger company is extremely difficult, right? To get a consolidated view. It may be difficult, right? If you're starting on a very hush-hush basis. Then if the next step is identifying what they have access to. The third step is identifying who the owners are. Briefly, I mentioned saying that we may start small with a third party, but as we grow, you would find that the third party is doing more and more services for our company. So this is where, if the contracting and procurement organizations are not tightly synced up with the third parties and with information security, we are running a risk of not knowing what the third party is doing and not knowing who the relationship owner is with the third party. So
I think it's a fascinating topic and a growing topic, I should say, also. So, and the good thing is, it forces, I think, the security team to engage more with the business, not just look at the IT devices, but actually at the story behind, how important is that third party for the business, how long-term is the relationship, and so forth. So that's a good thing by itself. But beyond the incidents, maybe the next obvious consideration is to look into risks. So what are the typical risks which we would have to manage when we deal with third parties? Maybe you can share your view on that.
Yeah, I think there are various types of it. Definitely people start with, okay, what is the risks that I'm living with if I share the sensitive information with the third party or a partner or a vendor, right? We are looking at legal risk in terms of if there is a leak of data, what legal implications would be there. Then we are looking at also geopolitical risks. Before we try to go with a specific vendor, we need to understand the geopolitical links.
And that's becoming very important these days. Yeah.
And then we are also running a risk of often ignored, risk, but a business concentration risk. You would find that all the majority of the critical services may be delivered by a specific vendor, right? And if something happens to that vendor, all the critical services would be affected. So that is more of a concentration risk that we are living with. And of course, business continuity risk, right? We may not be sharing any sensitive information with a vendor, but that vendor or a third party would be one of our critical vendors for our running the production line. Yeah, we are looking at various type of risks, right from cybersecurity to business continuity to geopolitical, which is really important these days, right? And concentration risks. Yeah.
Would you say that also, I mean, we implicitly mentioned them, but obviously there may be privacy related aspects, because if it's sensitive information, even your company must have a lot of information. So we're also subject to data protection laws, and not even to talk about the reputation, but certainly the even sanctions for if we have, I guess, outsourced to someone something which leads to a data protection issue, we may be subject to fines, especially in some countries, in Europe in particular, where GDPR fines are programmed and actually are given to a number of people. But also, it's not only the GDPR side, but I think there's also a notion of reputational risk. So if something goes wrong with a third party which causes an impact, and we talked many types of impact, it may impact the image or the reputation of the primary third party, or the customer, if you want, or the main party. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, right? If there is a breach at a third party, ultimately the organization is responsible for protecting the information that the customer has shared with the organization. And if something happens, the organization's image is at risk, right? And that's where the customer lose trust in you as a company. And it's very difficult to gain back that trust. So small companies are at huge risk in terms of if there is a reputation risk, they may actually shut down because customer may just lose their trust and move away to your competitors. Right? Large companies, yes, there would be a certain dent, and that's where the legal and regulatory fines are there as well. If there's a breach, apart from the fines, you have reputational impact. And because of this reputational impact, you will see over a course of duration, the reputational impact may not be visible right away, but over a course of time, you will see that less and less customers are being retained, or you can see the customers moving to your competitors. But that would happen over a course of duration.
I would imagine that depends whether the customer may not even know what is a third party and what is not a third party. So, but you can imagine that there are third parties. But I guess he imagines that you carefully select them and you carefully manage them, the same as you would for your own operation. So I would think there is a probably legitimate expectation from the customer that things are well managed. And I guess if you are regulated or if you are subject to compliance, then you have to include also the third parties in compliance aspects. I mean, data protection being one, but there may be others. Interestingly enough, and I add a little bit to our discussion, is in the new DORA regulation in Europe for financial services, they have introduced the notion of let's say industry-wide supplier, third party. You can imagine Google or Microsoft or a few others are providing services not only to one company but almost to everybody. And they are much more considered, much more systemic. You mentioned if something goes wrong with one of those, and there's a big issue for the industry, and especially financial services, where the trust in the banking system is something, the main preoccupation of any bank or bank manager and any any central bank, any regulator. In some sense, that's very important. And to on the other hand, you may be a very small player in the Microsoft empire, if I may say it.
Yeah.
And that's why they have introduced the notion that on a more European level, the authorities should specify what they call a lead overseer for these very big third parties, because nobody has enough leverage to negotiate even, or to make arrangements with them. I think that is also a very big evolution in recognizing the asymmetry between sizes in there, and I think hopefully that can be adopted.
Yeah, I think similar laws are also there in the United States, where they are pushing the responsibility to the big tech companies. But, they are responsible to provide secure and continuous service. So yeah, people are realizing that small companies may not be able to review the security practices or send a questionnaire to big data companies and get their responses, as generally we do with all the third parties. And that's where such regulations would help us in complying to all the regulations.
Super.